Welcome to the Rest is Politics Question Time with me, Rory Stewart.
And me, Alastair Campbell. So, Rory, we talked a lot recently about Afghanistan following your visit there, and it provoked a whole loads of questions from people about Afghanistan, in particular with a focus on education. But what about this one from Wanda Pommy? Should and can the West ramp up pressure on the Taliban in the face of what seems to be total and utter apartheid situation developing? I'm assuming that they mean the apartheid between men and women.
Yeah, it's a gender apartheid. I mean, it is very, very disturbing that the Taliban have made no secret since they were right back in the mid-1990s, so over 30 years, about the fact that they have this view, which really doesn't have much to do with traditional Islam. It's really a kind of tribal southeastern Afghan view that women should completely cover their faces, that they shouldn't be educated, that they should barely leave home. And the religious authorities, particularly the leader in Kandahar, keeps issuing more and more extreme edicts on this. The story on the ground in the country is a little bit more complicated. I mean, I was just in Afghanistan 2 weeks ago, and actually, if you walk around Kabul at the moment, most women are not covering their faces. They're not wearing those burqas, those classic things with a kind of net face covering. And there's clearly a tussle going on inside the Taliban government about how much this stuff gets implemented or doesn't. Same's true in education. I mean, the very, very strict rules in education. But again, in different parts of Afghanistan, people seem to be being educated online or using private schools or doing different types of things. The question of whether ramping up sanctions would make any difference, I'm afraid not. I think the Taliban government is pretty immune to that kind of stuff. This is not Nigerian politicians who want to go shopping in Harrods. These are people who've lived in caves, have been fighting for 20 years, don't care very much about sanctions' impact on them. The impact of the sanctions, unfortunately, are on ordinary Afghans, on 35, 40 million people who are struggling to feed themselves and whose economy is tanking. And the best hope, I'm afraid, is to keep trying to support ordinary Afghans and trust that the civil society that's been built up over 25 years will gradually exert that pressure. But I don't think the United Kingdom wagging its finger is going to have any impact at all. We have a question here from Simo and also from Lucar on RFK. Why do you think Kennedy has aligned with Trump? Do you think the Democrats should have followed due process and elected their candidate? And Lucar, I'd be interested to hear your take on RFK Jr. The family released a statement distancing themselves from him and his decision to back Trump. How has he evolved to be this person, coming from the ultimate Democrat family? Over to you.
I think on why he's aligned with Trump, I wouldn't be at all surprised if he's done some sort of deal. If Trump wins, get a job or something, I don't know. I think the real reason why he may have pulled out is that post the Biden decision to step down and make way for Vice President Harris, is Kennedy was pretty much tanking in the polls. It was costing him a lot of money to keep the campaign going. The family were very, very quick to release a statement, as Lucar says, distancing themselves. It probably is pretty awful for them to feel that somebody who trades on the Kennedy name and the JFK legend and all that, aligning himself with somebody whose values are so contrary. And it's interesting that very quickly on the media, when the decision was announced, people were playing back the clips of what these two have said about each other in the past. So whether it'll have an impact, that I don't think it's automatic that somebody who was backing Kennedy will back Trump, because I think a lot of the people who were backing Trump were coming from the other side of the fence, the other side of the political scale, as it were. What do you think?
Donald Trump apparently said about RFK in April, totally anti-gun, an extreme environmentalist who makes the green news scammers look conservative, a big-time taxer, an open border advocate, an anti-military vet. I'd even take Biden over Jr. So what he's getting at there is that he's not just the third son of Robert Kennedy, who was assassinated and therefore JFK's nephew. His career was as an environmental lawyer, where he took some extremely successful but quite radical cases on behalf sometimes of Native American communities, sometimes on behalf of threatened natural environments and wildernesses, often against big business, and very much seemed to be on the left, and was considered at one point for being the head of the Environmental Protection Organization under Obama and under Biden. His name was talked about. So he was very much there on the kind of Democrat environmentalist left. He's had a pretty peculiar, dubious personal life. I mean, he was very sadly a heroin addict, I think, from when he was 15 to when he was
Hmm.
in his mid-20s. And that obviously may have partly been connected with the fact that he lost his father. His father was assassinated. He's had a very rickety private life, and his wife left him when I think she'd found recorded in his diaries him recording that he'd slept with 36 women in a very short period
Hmm.
when he was still married to her. He's had these odd moments, like being done for leaving a bear in Central Park. He made this incredible claim that he couldn't pay proper alimony to his wife because a worm had got into his brain and eaten part of his brain, so his brain didn't work properly. He couldn't earn enough. And then Reid Hoffman and others are accused, Reid, who we interviewed on Leading, are accused of funding a campaign to point out that RFK was not a New York resident and therefore actually couldn't run. He'd managed to register himself incorrectly to run to be president, leaving him really with no choice other than to work out who to endorse. Um, do you think having someone like that's going to help?
Well, our friend and colleague Anthony Scaramucci is absolutely adamant that the whole third party thing, including uh, Kennedy, has been backed and funded by Steve Bannon and other kind of hard right Republicans as a way of trying to help Trump. So whether that's right or wrong, I don't know. I'm not convinced the lasting impact is going to be that huge. Here's one, Rory. AJM. When are you two going to discuss Taiwan properly, inviting a Taiwanese scholar on, spelling out to the public the reality of China? Well, we have literally, just before we recorded this, interviewed a wonderful person by the name of Audrey Tang. So, Rory, do you want to tell AJM a little bit about Audrey?
Yeah, I mean, Audrey Tang, incredibly exciting. Audrey Tang was the digital minister in Taiwan and completely transformed the way that technology was used in Taiwan. Firstly, very practically, to have an incredible COVID response. So they didn't have to lock down. They kept their economy growing and booming while also having very few people dying of COVID through the way they use technology, but also just the way in which it's completely rejuvenated democracy, trust in government by using very positive forms of government, I suppose, digital citizens' assemblies to get government going again. So,
Mm.
yes, people interested in Taiwan, please do listen to our leading interview coming soon with Audrey Tang.
Right, Rory, what about this one? Luke Davis, can you speak about the political significance of Pavel Durov's arrest in France, particularly his links to Russia? Macron is adamant the arrest is not political, but I'd like to hear your views. So this is the boss of the direct messaging platform Telegram, who has been arrested, and a judge has extended his period of detention, which means he can now be detained for up to 96 hours. Needless to say, the sort of Musks and all the sort of free speech libertarians are saying this is an absolute outrage. But what do you think of this one, Rory?
Yeah, well, so Pavel Durov, Telegram is huge, maybe 1 billion users now, so it's bigger than Twitter X. It was developed partly to deal with Russia itself. So Pavel Durov is not a sort of agent of the Russian government, although a lot of Russians use Telegram. I mean, famously, that was the way of keeping up with the Wagner group, was on looking at Telegram. Do you use Telegram, Alice? Did you look at it a bit?
No,
No.
no.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, but I mean, his deal basically is the way to protect free speech is to have a platform that governments can't get into. And that, of course, is very threatening because it's also, and this is a bit, like the discussions around Bitcoin and stuff, when something's completely removed from government control, yes, it's an opportunity for freedom and protecting you against bad governments, but it's also a huge opportunity for criminals to flourish. Telegram becomes and this is where the French government's getting involved. It's less about anti-Russian stuff. It's more about saying this is a platform that really allows criminal gangs to operate free of surveillance from governments.
One argument I heard when this issue came up a while back about whether this encryption stuff had gone too far was, and this would be an argument I guess that Telegram would be making in defense of Durov, is that when the telephone came along, the fact that criminals used the telephone to carry out their criminal activities by communicating to each other about what they were going to do together, that didn't lead to us all saying that the telephone should be shut down.
But
But I think the difference here is that when you know that technology is being used to get round the law, to commit criminal activity, and that the platform that you have built is the means by which that is done, that takes it to a different space. Because the fact is that the police and security services can listen to telephone calls and so forth. So it's very, very interesting. And of course, I guess that the Musks of this world, and Musk I see is continuing to sort of troll Keir Starmer and spread absolute lies about Britain and the state of Britain on social media. I guess this might just put a little bit of wind up them.
yeah, I mean, the Musk thing, I mean, just we keep banging on about it, but it is beyond imagining. He managed to retweet a deeply misleading article from a far right Islamophobic account. And by doing so, got, by the time I looked at it, 47 million people to view a post suggesting that Starmer was going to be spreading asylum seekers around here.
Yeah, the thing basically said as a fact that the Labour government now had a plan to basically to put asylum seekers ahead of British, resident British people already here in relation to, all sorts of stuff. Can this be real? Question mark, says Musk. Well, no, you jerk, it's not.
And he gets 47 million views and 350,000 likes by the time I looked at it. I mean, so 47 million views. I mean,
that's because he's basically said to the algorithm, can you make sure that my tweets go to everybody? It's not difficult. I mean, well done, Elon. Oh my God, you've done well. Lots of people like seeing what you've got. He is virtually the number one thing that I see I am cutting back so much on shitter, as Leighton Andrews calls it, but when I do nip on there to sort of, post an interview that we've done from Chicago, invariably Elon Musk is at the top of my timeline. So I think we know how he gets all the views.